Hey, in this Off the Beaten Path episode, I'm going to visit with a friend of mine, Clive Rosengren, author of a series of mystery novels. We'll be right back and talk about his books he's written. Welcome back to Pine Meadows Hobby Farm. I'm your host, Jerry Hansen. I like to take you guys off the beaten path. I like to get off the beaten path once in a while, just to get off the homestead and get away from farming. It's a relief to come down into the valley and visit my friends. This is Clive Rosengren. Clive, how you doing, sir?
Hi, Jerry. How are you?
Thank you for inviting me into your home.
My pleasure.
Clive is not only a screen actor, I've worked with them on a couple of projects. We'll talk about those projects in another episode. But I really want to talk to Clive about his books he's authored. Clive, I got to tell you, your books, something interesting and unique about them. I'm really not a fan of, never been a fan of mystery novels, but
Shame on you.
you have made me a fan. Clive has written, I've already read 5 of these books. 5. He's got a 6th one coming. That's this one, Roomtone. So it'll be released when?
August 14th.
August 14th. Okay.
Yeah.
I've already got pre-ordered. I'm waiting for it to come.
Good.
And I got to tell you, your main character in this novel is very likable, and your secondary character is very likable and enjoyable. Tell me about how you came about transitioning from screen actor to novelist.
Well, I spent 18 years in LA, doing whatever came across the doorstep. But at one point, an actor friend of mine and myself joined a screenwriting workshop that was ongoing, and we wrote this screenplay called Lights, Camera, Murder. It was about an actor who, rather than tend bar, drive Uber, sell real estate or whatever, he got his day job by opening up his own private eye office. He served some time in the Army, and he was an armed guard at a gated community, so he had the qualifications to become a California private eye. And I figured, the script was named Lights, Camera, Murder, and it was a terrible screenplay. Just awful. But at one point I asked my friend if I could take it and novelize it, because I had the idea I could write it into a novel. He said sure. So I wrote the first one. It was I got it to the point where I got a publisher for it, and it wound up being shortlisted for the Shamus Award, which is an award from the Private Eye Writers of America.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I wrote a second one, and that also was shortlisted. And then I got a third one, and I submitted it to a different publisher, a Coffeetown Press up in Seattle.
Okay.
And they wanted to publish all of them, so they had them all in their own stable. So I had to get the rights back to the first 2 that I had done. One didn't cost me any money. The second one did, unfortunately, but then they were all within the stable of Coffeetown Press up in Seattle. So
Okay.
yeah, and I don't know where the idea for the private eye came from. It just, I don't know, it sort of crystallized in my mind at one time. And most actors in LA have to have some job, subsistence job to keep, food on the table. And I thought, well, here this guy has got these qualifications for a private eye. So he opened his own private eye office right on Hollywood Boulevard. And the books are meant to have one foot in the TV and film business, and the other foot in the private eye business. So I get a chance to tell some stories from behind the camera, off the camera, and all that. So
Now, when I was reading through your books, you have to read them in order of the series. They're not listed as book 1, book 2, book 3, but you can figure out which one comes first, which one comes next, because your storyline is a progressing storyline, because your next book speak some about what you wrote about in your previous book.
Yeah, I suppose they can be read separately, but there are certain things that carry over to the following books. Like in the first one, he discovers something that is then touched upon in book number 4.
Mm-hmm.
You know, brought back. But yeah, there's and the sixth book, Frog in a Bucket, and Roomtone. Roomtone is kind of a sequel to Frog in a Bucket because many of the same characters or many of the same plot elements come back to haunt Eddie and his cohort Reggie Benson.
Yeah, I did read the back of that synopsis of the new book coming out. It's not out yet, but I read the synopsis and got a hint that it's picking up where the other one left off. It's like, good for you. I kind of like the saga of the story. It just keeps continuing little bits at a time.
Yeah.
And it expounds on some characters even bigger. I love Tired Reggie.
Tired Reggie, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I ran across a guy. Full disclosure, I'm a friend of Bill W. So I was at an AA meeting in Cincinnati at one time, and there was this elderly black gentleman who got up to talk, and his name was Reggie, and he said, "How?" And people would say, "How you doing, Reggie?" He said, "Oh man, I'm tired. I'm tired." And I said, "Tired Reggie. I've got to use that somewhere."
Oh, good.
So I created the character of Reggie Benson, a guy who's homeless. He's on the streets in out by the Santa Monica Pier, and Eddie sort of takes him under his wing, and now he's kind of his operative as we go along.
Yeah, I loved your character. I mean, I love the simplicity and the just the humanity of your character. He doesn't drink. He doesn't do drugs. He just fell on bad circumstances where sometime I got to take you to dinner and tell you my story about that relates to Tired Reggie. Yeah, it may give you fodder for a new book. Yeah, it includes murder too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there's my life is like an onion. But I think that's why I was so drawn into your stories, because I talked to you on the phone about this. I found out from you that some of your descriptions of buildings were fictitious, and the placement of one building you were talking about where the main character's name is Eddie Collins, part-time actor, part-time detective, and he has an office that he lives in a back room in his office that sits across on one side of Hollywood Boulevard, and it overlooks the theater. And how you described it, it described the location where our casting office is for the shows that we do. And I was like, oh, that's a coincidence. I got to tell Clive that.
Yeah, it's I really haven't specified what block of Hollywood Boulevard is, but I just sort of made it up and go from there, you know.
Yep. And you finally gave him a girlfriend in one of the books.
Yeah, he runs across a girl in the third book, Velvet on a Tuesday afternoon. Mm-hmm. A former colleague of his that they worked together on a film project comes into his office, and she wants him to find her brother that she's lost track of, and she thinks that might be in trouble. And she at that point in the story, she dances at a gentleman's club, and under the name of Velvet LaRose. So I said, oh, Velvet on a Tuesday afternoon. So, yeah, and the spark between Eddie and Carla Rizzoli is her real name, reignites to a certain degree, and they wind up being a couple, and I won't spoil it, but
yeah,
they get pretty serious.
Yeah, get the book, read it. I found it, I don't think I told you this, but like I did tell him that I was never really a mystery novel fan until I started reading Ib's books. I ordered all of them. One of them came in later. I think the last one came in later. But once I started reading Ron, I couldn't put it down. I seriously, literally could not put your book down. I sat there and read the whole thing in a day and a half, and I was glad I had the other book. I picked that up and started to continue reading it. It took me about a day and a half per book. And then finally, by the time I reached to the last page of the last book, the fifth book came in, and I was excited because I got to continue the saga. It's like, Luckily, I had something to do because it was so hot outside. I could
Yeah.
not stand to go outside and work in the heat. But these books, you made me a fan
Well,
of mystery.
good. Glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, my first book. Long story here, but you know the crime writer Michael Connelly,
Yes.
who writes the Bosch series. Well, I got to know him when I was down in L.A. because I would go to book signings at different mystery bookstores, which are no longer there, but at that time they were. And all the A-listers came through: Robert Grace, Michael Connelly, Lee Child, and all that. And so he got to know me, and I got to know him. He knew I was an actor. And there was one particular Saturday I was at a Mystery Writers of America event out in Beverly Hills, and I happened to be sitting at the same table with him. We're having lunch, and I mentioned to him that I was writing this PI novel, and he volunteered to read it. Now he's very good about that. He always does that, pays it forward. So I said, well, good. So I finished it, where I got a first draft where I thought it worked, you know. And I thought, God, I wonder if he even remembers saying that, you know. So I went to his website and wrote to the web mistress, and she said, well, let me run it. I told him, you know, the details, and she said, well, let me run it by Michael, see what he says. So she did, and he said, yeah, send it on down. So he was living in Florida at the time, so I sent it down. Now, 18 months go by, and I don't know, you know, I don't want to bug this guy.
Yeah.
He turns these things out once a year, you know. But out of the blue, and I still have it somewhere on my computer, I got an email from him. Said, "Dear Clive, this is one of the most difficult emails I've ever had to write. I was going through my office, old manuscripts and stuff, and there was yours, unread. Now, I hope you say no problem. You got it published and all that, but if you want me to read it, still read it, let's send it on down." So I did. And he gave me some very good notes, one of which was primary with him. He said, what your biggest hurdle is to get the voice of your PI, of the character. And he said, I had no problem hooking in with Eddie Collins. He said, that's good. So I've kept that in mind. You know, he's cynical. He's a bit of a wise ass, but he's got a sense of humor. But at the same time, he's got a sense of what's right and what's wrong, you know?
How much of that is autobiographical?
Well, you know, anybody that writes a novel with the first person narrative is lying if he says it's a part of you. You know? So yeah, there are certain aspects of Eddie Collins, you know, that I probably share. But
Yeah. Well, reading through the books, I could see different things and recall different things from different conversations we've had over the years, or over the last year, because I just met you on the set of Eve of May,
Mhm.
and I could see some of what I knew about you and some of what I would read about you. It's like, oh yeah. And that's what I wanted to ask you is how much of this book is autobiographical?
well, there's a movie collection.
Yes, you talk heavily about that.
Eddie collects DVDs. Now I don't know about the bobbleheads, but yeah, you know, he's an actor. He's not an A-lister by any
No.
means, but he makes enough to, you know, he's got a pension fund and all that, and he does what comes along, which I pretty much did the 18 years I was there.
Yeah.
You know, whatever jobs came along, you took them. You know, and that's another. I've tried to come up with stuff that I've experienced being in that city for 18 years, behind the camera or off camera, that you wouldn't know about. For instance, in the first book, Murder Unscripted, we first meet Eddie
Mhm.
when he's doing a commercial for Chubby's Chicken. Well, I did a series of commercials for McDonald's one time years ago, and he's working with a young kid who's just not been around very long. And at one point, the production assistant comes up and asks these two guys, they're sitting around a campfire, a fake campfire, and he asks these two guys if they want a spit bag. And the kid says, "What's a spit bag?" And he says, "Trust me," he says, "after all day
I
eating
know
this
that.
chicken, you're going to want something to get. You're going to have to get rid of that out of your mouth, the taste of it." So, and I've had many readers go, "Spit bag? I never knew that was a thing." Oh yeah, it's a thing. You know? So it's kind of stuff like that that people maybe wouldn't necessarily think that they would think of, you know.
So now you've got this sixth book coming out,
Right.
and it's due to be released on the
14th of August. Yeah.
14th of August. I'm anxiously waiting for my copy. Where'd you come up with the name Roomtone?
Well, I I'm going to have to demur and say you're going to have to read the book to find out what it means. But it's a technical term that's used in filmmaking, and it basically is, it's a sound man wanting ambiance of a room after the take is done. He wants 60 seconds of room tone, and so everyone's quiet, and hopefully nobody makes a sound, and that's called room tone.
Okay.
And what they do with it, I'm not sure. They do it in post-production.
And that goes back to movie making, which is another episode I'm going to be filming right after we wrap up this episode. So stay tuned for that episode. And Clive, somebody wrote a thing on the back of your book for your books, and he says, "My friend Clive Rosengren has created a guy I'd like to get to know, Eddie Collins. I wouldn't mess with him, but you would want his number in your wallet. Signed, Tom Hanks." Didn't you go to school with Tom?
No, I didn't go to school with him, but I worked with him in 1977. It was my first year at the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival in Cleveland.
Okay.
And the artistic director the previous winter had directed a production of, I believe it was The Cherry Orchard, I think it's Sac State in California. And he brought a bunch of those kids that were in that production to Cleveland to work, serve as interns, changing sets, and basically slave labor is what they were. And Tom Hanks was one of them.
Oh.
And we got to know each other. We had a mutual love for baseball, so we saw a lot of baseball games together. He was there in '77. He was also there in '78. I wasn't, but then in '79 he had gotten his equity card by that time, and he was back for a third season. And we really got to be good friends over in Cleveland. And and so when I moved to Hollywood, I gave me a couple of jobs. I borrowed money from him, which I paid back. But he's still a friend. We still communicate now and then.
That's neat.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk more about your relationship and the productions you worked with him on in our next episode.
Okay.
So, Clive, thank you again for having me.
My
and
pleasure,
sitting
Jerry.
down and talking about your books. Folks, these are, I gotta say so myself, these are excellent reads. And literally, honestly, I could not put them down.
Incidentally, the last one, Frog in a Bucket, also was shortlisted for the Shamus. So I've had 3 nominations for the Shamus out of 5 books. I must be doing something right.
You are. Well, if you got me hooked, you did something right.
Good.
Well, I'm Jerry Hansen, your host. This is Pine Meadows Hobby Farm, off the beaten path in the home of Clive Rosengren. He now is a resident of Southern Oregon here in the Rogue Valley.
Right?
Yeah.
Since 2004. I've been here for 20 years. It's the longest I've lived in a community in my entire life.
Nice. So you got another book you're working on. This
Number
one's coming out, but you got another book.
Yeah,
you're working on.
I'm 4 chapters into a new one. I think I've got a dynamite beginning, but the problem is I don't know where I want to go with it yet.
I'm gonna take you to dinner. I think I got something. I think I have something for you that you could chew on.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and stay tuned for the next episode. We're going to be talking about his film career. Yes.
Yes, well, it's a career, I guess, but I was 40 years in the business. I guess I had a pretty good run as an actor, but.
Yep, and you haven't stopped yet.
Not really.
Kind of, sort of,
Not
it
really.
made more of a hobby then.
Yeah.
All right. So stay tuned for that episode. Give us a thumbs up. Click that share button. Sharing my videos on your social media platforms helps us out. Remember, be safe, always be kind, and let me know down in the comments how you're liking my interviews. Yes.
Thanks, folks.
We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.